Today, we're digging into something that, believe it or not, shapes your entire professional life. It's called identity work.
So just think about it for a second. When you walk into the office or, log on to Slack, who are you? Are you the go-to expert everyone leans on? The newbie who's still trying to figure out where the coffee machine is? Maybe you're the leader calling the shots, or the supportive friend everyone vents to. We all wear these different hats, right? But who we really are on the clock? Well, that's a much more complicated question.
And it turns out that sense of self you have at your job isn't something that just exists. Nope, it's something you are actively building and negotiating and fighting for every single day. And in the world of organizational studies, there's a name for this: identity work. To really get what that means, we kind of have to rewind a bit and see how we even got to this idea in the first place.
For decades, all sorts of thinkers have been trying to crack the code of human identity. You can think of their different theories as looking at the same puzzle just through 5 totally different lenses. Let's run through them. Okay, so the first lens is called role theory, and it's pretty straightforward. It says your identity is basically the sum of all the roles you play. You're a manager, you're a team member, you're a mentor. And you can feel the tension, right? Like that awkward moment when you have to be the boss and give tough feedback to someone who is also your friend. Every role has a script, and your identity is how you decide to play it. The second lens zooms out a bit. This is social identity theory, and it says a huge part of who you are comes from the groups you feel like you belong to. Think about being an engineer versus being in sales, or being part of the head office crew versus the remote team. That feeling of us creates this powerful shared identity, and, for better or worse, it definitely shapes how we see them.
All right, this third lens gets a lot more personal. Narrative theory says your identity is basically the story you're telling about yourself. And the key word here is story, because it's always being edited, always being rewritten. So that layoff last year, was that a story about failure, or was it the moment that pushed you toward a career you actually love? You're the author here. You're the one holding the pen. Now, for a lens that's, well, a little more intense, psychodynamic theory argues that our nice, stable sense of self is often just a defense mechanism. It's kind of a fantasy we create to protect ourselves from our deepest anxieties. You know that feeling of imposter syndrome? That's the crack in the fantasy. It's that nagging fear that the confident expert identity you're showing everyone isn't actually real.
And our final lens sees all of life as a big play. According to dramaturgical theory, identity isn't something you have, it's something you do. It is a performance. Your office? That's the stage. Your work clothes? That's your costume. And that game face you put on for a huge client meeting? That's you, the actor, playing a very specific part for a very specific audience.
So, we've got roles, we've got groups, we've got stories, fantasies, and performances. And for a really long time, these were all just separate ideas floating around. But then a new perspective came along that managed to pull them all together under one really powerful idea: identity work. Okay, I know, that sounds a little academic, right? But what this classic definition is really saying is pretty profound. The focus isn't on who you are, it's on the activities, the things you do. Identity work is all the effort, the constant grind of creating, showing off, and holding on to who we are both for ourselves and for everyone else. It's not a thing, it's a process.
And this brings us to how experts think about it today, which is based on 5 core ideas. First, we are reflexive, meaning we're always thinking about and actively working on who we are. Second, we don't just have one identity, we have a bunch of them, and they're always changing. Third, and this is a big one, this work always happens inside power structures like your company's culture. Fourth, the goal isn't just to be authentic, it's way more complicated than that. And finally, this whole process isn't just some personal journey. It's absolutely fundamental to how businesses and organizations actually get things done.
But here's where it gets really interesting. Just when everyone kind of settled on this idea of identity work, some researchers started asking a tough question. Is work even the right word for this? I mean, it's just a metaphor. And as it turns out, it is far from the only one out there.
So how many other metaphors are we talking about? Well, get this. One major review of all the key research articles found 137 of them. Yes, 137. Researchers have described what we do with our identities as everything from play and jujitsu to bricolage, which is this cool idea of just tinkering and piecing things together. So work is really just the tip of a very, very big iceberg.
And the result is this, just a dizzying number of terms.
I mean, this table is just a tiny sample from the research, listing ideas like identity flux, identity repair, identity crafting, identity threats. The list just goes on and on. And while that's great for creativity, this vast array of terms, as the researchers call it, can sometimes end up creating more confusion than it does clarity.
So here's the crucial point. Not all metaphors are created equal. Researchers make this distinction between live metaphors, these are the fresh ones, the ones that spark new ideas, and dead metaphors. A dead metaphor is a term like identity construction that we've just used so many times we forget it's a metaphor at all. We start treating it like it's literal truth, and that can actually shut down new ways of thinking about who we are.
Okay, theory is great, but how does any of this actually apply to your career? Why does it matter what words we use? Well, because if we get trapped by these dead metaphors, we might miss out on new, better ways of leading and growing. The words we use really matter because they shape the actions we take. So why is getting a handle on this concept of identity work, whatever you end up calling it, so important?
Because it's basically a toolkit for your career. When you start a new job or you get that big promotion, you are actively doing identity work. When you get tough feedback or a huge project fails, that's an identity threat, and you have to work to cope with it. Trying to understand office politics, or even just figuring out what motivates you, it all comes back to the identities you and everyone around you are constantly trying to build and protect.
And it goes even deeper than that. When you realize that everyone is going through this process, it helps you lead with so much more empathy. It helps you spot when your company is trying to shape who you are, which gives you the power to either adapt or push back. And at the end of the day, it's about taking control and actively crafting a work life that actually feels meaningful to you.
So, if there's one thing to take away from all this, it's this. Your professional identity isn't some fixed thing you just have to discover. It's a dynamic story that you are writing every single day. It's a performance you're directing. It's a role you're choosing to play. So the only real question left is, what are you going to write in the next chapter?